right, Jesse's giving us a thumbs up, so we'll go ahead and call the Monday, April 24th, 2023 Gardner Planning Commission meeting to order. Everyone please rise and state the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll now move into roll call, starting on my right.
Holmes, present.
Commissioner Souza here.
Commissioner Ham here.
Mater here.
McNair here.
Commissioner Juneman here.
We have a quorum present of 6 with 1 absent. Moving down to the consent agenda. All matters listed within the consent agenda have been distributed to each member of the Planning Commission for study. These items are considered to be routine and will be enacted upon by one motion with no separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired on an item from either the Planning Commission or from the floor, that item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. We have one item. The standing approval of the minutes is written for the meeting on March 27th. Is there any item any member of the commission would like to have moved to the regular agenda? Anyone from the public would like to have the item moved to the regular agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
A motion
Second.
to accept by Ham with a second by Juneman. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. The consent agenda is approved. Regular agenda item number 1, Lakes of Conestoga second plat, PP-23-01 preliminary plat, and FP-23-02 final plat, the east side of Conestoga Drive, approximately 100 feet south of East Orange Street. Do we have a staff presentation this evening?
We do, and
Great.
forgive me, this screen isn't on, so I might be looking to the side.
No worries.
So the subject property is adjacent to the Lakes of Conestoga development. This is a small parcel. It's 0.3 acres in size. It's currently unplatted, undeveloped, and to be built on, it is required to be platted. So this is one lot, and staff has a recommendation that, or a condition of approval, that future development must meet the zoning requirements of the RM-P planning district to ensure design compatibility with the Lakes of Conestoga Mobile Home Park. Here's the final plat. The layout follows that of the preliminary plat, and it meets all the review criteria of the Land Development Code. Staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval of both the preliminary plat and final plat to the governing body with the conditions in the recommended motion.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Do we have the applicant here with us for anything they'd like to comment or state? So please come forward, state your name and address for the public record.
Doug Ubben with Phelps Engineering, just here to stand for questions, agree with all the stipulations. So if you have any questions, feel free, or happy to answer them.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is Planning Commission's discussion. I think I'll just start down on my left here this time, mix it up. Commissioner Juneman, any questions, comments?
No questions.
McNair? Ham?
No question.
Souza?
I just have a question, I don't know if it's to the staff. Why they split into different items, second plat and third plat?
Yeah, so the different parcels, and maybe the applicant can better explain it, but because of the separation of the different parcels and the platting that was done for the Lakes of Conestoga, the original big development, which left these two pieces out, it was felt that it was better to have those two separate plats. I think I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
it's
just curious.
just because they're not contiguous. So since one's on the west side of the last Lakes of Conestoga development, one's on the east, that's why they're separate.
Thank you. Commissioner Combs?
No question.
Okay, I don't have any questions either. If there are no other discussion items or questions, I will entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make that motion.
Great.
After a review of applications PP-23-01, preliminary plat, and FP-23-02, final plat for Lakes of Conestoga, second plat, and staff report date April 19th, 2023, the Planning Commission recommends approval of the application as proposed, provided the following conditions are met. 1, the applications shall be reviewed and approved by the Johnson County Airport Commission and Board of County Commissioners prior to the release of the plat for recording. And 2, add a note to the final plat that future development must meet the standards of RM-P, Residential, Manufactured, and Mobile Home Planning District.
Second.
Great. Motion made by Ham, and I got a second by Juniman. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. All right, regular agenda item number 2. Lakes of Conestoga third plat, PP-23-02 preliminary plat, and FP-23-03 final plat, the north side of the intersection of East Park Street and Blue Springs Drive. Staff, do we have a presentation?
Yes.
Great.
So this is the other plat that Souza was mentioning. This is on the northwest section of the Lakes of Conestoga, while the other one was on the northeast, and the other one was on the southwest. This plat is 0.61 acres in size. It too is unplatted and would be required to be platted to be developed. Shown here is the preliminary plat. Just like the first, it is one lot, and staff has the identical recommendations of approval. The plat does provide for an additional 40 feet of right-of-way along Santa Fe Street, since it is designated as an arterial. The plat meets all the review criteria of the Land Development Code. Staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend approval of both the preliminary and final plats with the conditions in the recommended motion.
Great, fantastic. Thanks, Jesse. So I believe we also have the applicant here. If there's anything else you want to add, come forward, state your name and address. I think we're good, just over questions. Perfect. Okay, I'll start down on my right this time. Commissioner Combs, any questions?
Yeah, I do have one question.
Perfect.
It may be similar to Commissioner Souza, but maybe in the opposite direction.
Okay,
So this lot 3 is a single lot, but it does, I understand it's contiguous. There is a street in between. If there were to be further development, would there be multiple home sites, or would that require another separation or zone between lots?
Yes.
Or-
So the intent is to put 2 units on this one lot. So if you go back on the aerial, you can see the street that you're referring to that bisects it. Before Lakes of Conestoga was developed, there was a temporary turnaround there. So in that picture, it's been removed. You can kind of see where it was. So removing that allowed for the 2 additional units on this piece. They're not sold as individual units, so they're owned by one entity, so they can all be on one lot.
Thank you, that's clear.
And Commissioner Combs, the other part of this is that road is a private road. It's not a public road. So from the standpoint of placing manufactured housing on there and setbacks and things like that, it would be done a little bit differently than the typical single-family lot.
Perfect, thank you. No further questions.
okay, good. Commissioner Souza?
Question?
Commissioner Ham?
No questions.
McNair?
Nope.
Gentlemen?
I'm good.
I don't have any either. Okay, if there's no other questions, comments, I'll entertain a motion on this
I'll,
item.
I'll make that motion.
Great.
After review of application PP-23-02 preliminary plat and FP-23-03 final plat for Lakes of Conestoga, third plat, and staff report dated April 19, 2023, the Planning Commission recommends approval of the application as proposed, provided the following conditions are met. 1, the application shall be reviewed and approved by the Johnson County Airport Commission and Board of County Commissioners prior to the release of the plat for recording. And 2, add a note to the final plat that for future development must meet the standards of RM-P, residential, manufactured, and mobile home planning district.
Second.
Okay, good. Got a motion made by McNear with a second by Ham. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? And I'll ask, we don't have any abstentions. I keep forgetting to ask that. Okay, motion carries 6-0. Okay, item number 3, Fairfield Development, Z-22-09 rezoning, PDP-22-09 preliminary development plan, and PP-22-06 final plat, south of West 183rd Street in the vicinity of South Poplar Street. Staff.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. Dave Nopik, Community Development Director. Tonight's item is somewhat of a perfunctory item. I'm going to talk more to process and what's going on here in the process than the actual case itself. So, as you know, at your March 27th, 2023 meeting, you held a public hearing regarding this item on the rezoning, the preliminary development plan, and the preliminary plat. That recommendation from the Planning Commission was forwarded to the governing body for their consideration at their April 17th, 2023 meeting. They did consider the item as noted in the staff report of the cover memo that was provided to you in your packets. They did meet on that. They listened to a staff presentation which gave a recap of the development as well as the process up to that point in time. They also heard from the applicant as well as the citizens, or some of the citizens that were there that came up to speak to them during that meeting. They then held discussion during that period of time, and as a result of that discussion made a motion to send it back to the Planning Commission, which is one of their voting options that they have before them on typical rezoning cases that we see. That motion to come back to you is based on the fact that they could not come to a resolution as to whether to vote for approval or denial of the proposal. So what they came back with was the motion to allow for the Planning Commission to look at this item again, specifically focused in on traffic issues primarily generated by this item. I'm looking off my shoulder just kind of like Jesse. I want to make sure I've covered everything here. You can see the recap and the bullet points there again about March 27th. As you'll note here, the staff had a recommendation of approval with conditions. The Planning Commission had recommended denial, and the governing body sent this back to the Planning Commission. The suggested motion before you tonight is to allow basically for more time to study this development and look at the potential for new plans that may generate different traffic results on this. So when I put this in front of you, you do have some options tonight. So this is just the suggested motion that's coming from us, and I want to note there's a little bit of a wording change that's happened on this since the time the packet was developed, so I'll go over what's up on the screens in a minute. But you do have the option to resubmit your original recommendation and giving the reasons why you're doing that, or you can submit a new or amended recommendation. This is essentially a new recommendation that's coming out of this. So I've talked with the city attorney's office to make sure everything's in line with process and procedure. If you follow the suggested motion and decide to make that motion and approve it, this item will actually go to the city council next Monday night. They will then confirm that they've received your recommendation per the rules and regulations of the local ordinance as well as the state regulations here. And if they approve of that, they'll grant that extension to your May 22nd meeting. So hopefully I've kept you in at least somewhat informed there. So the motion that's suggested is a motion requesting the governing body allow the Planning Commission more time to, whoa, that didn't take. All right, that's the old motion that's up there.
So, and I'll jump in, and I will jump in when it's time to make the motion, if this is the motion you want to go, but I think what we want to say is a motion recommending that the governing body allow more time to further investigate. So we're going to take out the phrase planning commission because it won't necessarily just be you taking that additional time to investigate. And we're going to change requesting to recommending because the statute requires you all to make a recommendation rather than just a request, which sounds like nothing, and that's what I went to school for 3 years to talk to you about. So it's recommending.
I'm so good.
If you ever wondered how
It's
exciting law
recommending.
school was,
That's great.
And that's also what we pay him for.
That's what we do.
So my understanding of the suggested motion tonight is a motion recommending the governing body allow additional time to further investigate potential traffic solutions by way of potential new plans and traffic studies relating to the proposed Fairfield rezoning and preliminary development plan at the Planning Commission's May 22nd, 2023 meeting. That's what I have written. With that, I'm available for questions.
Okay. Great. And I think we also do have the applicant with us for any questions that might come up.
Yes,
Perhaps
so
during
if you
discussion,
choose, if you,
'cause this is
in
not
your
a public
discussion, yeah, there is,
and we're not doing
I
comments.
should have explained that. So, you're correct, this is not a reopening of the public hearing. You held the public hearing on March 27th. I think that's the correct date. On March 27th, usually I have it right in front of me. And at that point, you'd heard public comment, you closed the official public hearing at that point. So at this point, it's essentially discussion amongst the planning commissioners, and if you have specific questions of either the staff or potentially the applicant in that discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Okay. All right, guys. So let's have discussion. There's obviously, Dave went through the options. We can, like you said, and it's in the staff report, right? We can move forward with what we've already recommended, or we can amend it, or we can, as the suggestion, right? It's always just a suggestion. It's not telling you what to do, but allowing that additional time to whoever, whatever, revisit the plan and come back with something
Correct.
to alleviate the traffic solutions, because we've had a lot of discussion, and the traffic was, I mean, it was general consensus around the board. It was traffic. So
Yeah.
I'll stop talking and I'll look at Commissioner Combs. We'll start down my right. Questions, comments, and you don't have to, I mean,
So I don't wanna
we don't want to rehash.
rehash the
Correct.
27th.
That's exactly
but
right.
I do have maybe some generic questions. One is, anything that we were to recommend goes back to the governing body. Could you please remind me, if this is procedural where it doesn't belong?
No
It's coming
procedurals
quiet, but
belongs here. Yep.
as it relates to how their approval and the majority votes that they might need, isn't there something in the statute
There
that
is.
would remind me, because this matter is going back to them a second time?
Correct. So, and I'm gonna let Spencer chime in here because I want to be careful what I say. So with this item, you would be sending it back to the governing body at this point in time to either reaffirm whatever recommendation you're bringing forward to them or to vote on that recommendation. So if you chose to send your original recommendation back to the governing body at this point in time, it would go back to the governing body on next Monday with that same recommendation at that point. The voting procedure, and this is where I'm going to have Spencer kind of jump in just a little bit, because your original recommendation was denial of the proposal that was before you. One thing that you may have seen if you watched the city council or the governing body thing was the recommendation or the recommended motion of approval with an adopted ordinance. And that was only done that way because procedurally an ordinance has to be drafted and put together. So their voting process, though, would have been, if they would have approved that, it would have required a 2/3 vote because it was overturning your recommendation.
Right, they would overturn that.
Okay,
so
at
it's a
that point in
supermajority.
time. So that was one of the issues there. Then, if they would have gone with that motion, if they would have gone against that motion, voted it down, they would have only had to have done that by a simple majority. Now, with our governing body, the interesting part of this is it's 6 voting members. So a 2/3 requirement and a simple majority is the same number. It's 4 out of the 6. So it's kind of unusual. We're used to having odd numbers when it comes to governing bodies, but the governing body voting per state statute includes the mayor. So here in Gardner, we have an odd number of city council members, and the mayor, who would have usually been like a tie-breaking vote, could potentially be a tie and make it a 3-3 vote. So it's a little bit unusual and a little bit different. When this item goes back, whatever recommendation, my understanding of the state statute, and I think Spencer, I'm gonna have you chime in a little bit here, is that it may only require a simple majority of the group to go ahead and either approve or deny it because it came back a second time. Again, that's 4 of the 6. So we're still in the same boat either way. It would make a bigger difference if we had that odd number and you were calculating based on having 9 voting people versus the 6 voting people or something like that. I hope I've covered that,
Yeah,
Spencer.
no, Dave did it well. I think because this is Gardner, the easiest way to think about it is either way, it's going to take 4 votes.
4 out of 6.
Which, and I don't mean that to diminish what you all are doing. Your recommendation is still a recommendation to them, but it's going to take them 4 votes to decide what to do.
Good question. That's totally right.
So thank you for the
Here.
clarity.
Yeah, it's a very good question.
I know this is what's complex.
This is an unusual situation for the planning commission. So.
And I apologize to.
No apologies.
I do have maybe one other question. Maybe you can remind me from the 27th. Was there a particular reason why phase 1 is phase 1 and 2 being 2? Meaning, why was this small area of the property looked to be developed on before the other one? Here's why I raised that question for clarity. The big issue is traffic, and obviously the main entry points or lack thereof are what create some of those challenges or concerns. And there's also been mentioned that there would be additional development to address that without obviously phase 2 being developed. So was there, back to the original question, was there a particular reason why phase 1 is phase 1 versus the latter?
Yeah, I can attempt to address it fairly quickly for you. When this proposal, let's go back a number of years. Originally, this development was proposed for rezoning, I believe it was in 2018,
It was.
Mr.
I
Mayor.
was not there.
And
Yes.
so it originally came through requesting rezoning of the whole area, but it did not have a development plan at that point in time, okay? So it didn't go any further than the planning commission at that point in time. It was withdrawn from the agenda at that point. When it came back to us after several, I would say, questions and discussions with the applicant between 2018 and what you have before you, different iterations were done and different looks were looked at the density and the timing and how things could happen. Even with this proposal, when it first came in with the application, it actually had 39 single-family units instead of 27, which is the current proposal. The amount of multifamily stayed the same at about 90, I believe it's 94 of multifamily units. Part of that reduction, part of looking at this as a phase 1, was looking at the parameters that the city has for maximum traffic loading of residential streets. So this proposal for phase 1 essentially came just under the 1,500 average daily trips that are seen as the maximum amount we want to see on our residential roads. So that's where this kind of comes in and was carved out. And the idea behind phase 2 being carved out is that could not be developed until there were additional connections made to the south or east outside of the existing development. So that's how this kind of came into this geographic area. Now that also means that there's probably other iterations, other things that we can look at during this period of time to see if there's other ways to reduce that traffic or connect the traffic in a different way to the system.
No additional, thank you very much. No additional questions. I'll maybe make a final comment. I've had a good opportunity to spend some time personally in this area since the 27th meeting.
Good,
And
as you should.
I would state there's going to have to be some serious traffic adjustments and or maybe a complete change in how it's presented in terms of how things are developed before I believe the community's concerns will be fully addressed. So, but no other questions.
Okay. Commissioner Sosa, thank you, Commissioner Combs. Good questions too, by the way.
Yeah, and then I did the same thing after our last meeting, and I spent some time there just kind of watching the area and kind of see how traffic flows and the movement of cars and people. So, yeah, I agree with the motion
with our original motion, or possibly
this one,
the
the
potential, the
new one.
suggestion? Okay, okay,
Yeah.
that's good to get kind of a feeling where you're kind of at, okay? No questions or anything else you wanna know?
Nope.
Okay, Commissioner Ham?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Sosa. I would like to give the applicant the opportunity to come back with suggestions on how we can mitigate the traffic, because that is a major concern. I would love to see changes. I love and welcome and relish the opportunity of bringing diverse housing to Gardner, but without it being a detriment to our current homeowners. So, yes, I would love to see suggestions for how we can better affect lowering the traffic to where it's not pushing that threshold, because we're extremely close to that threshold to where it's just unsafe. So I would love to see more suggestions. So I would love to have the opportunity for everyone to be able to come up with better suggestions to help. So, yeah.
Okay, all right. Commissioner McNair?
Yeah, I had some questions.
Sure.
I share the concerns of our fellow commissioners. I too spent some time driving the area, observing traffic patterns at different times of the day, and I had 3 or 4 questions here, either for our Public Works or the traffic engineer that done the study on this. Is that person available tonight?
Yeah, the city engineer is here tonight. So I think let's ask the questions first, and then we'll figure out who's
Okay,
best
the
to answer
first question
them.
is, what percentage of traffic, when we assumed, and I was at the city council meeting the other night, when we assumed that a certain percentage of traffic would go up 184th Street and out to Gardner Road, what I'm kind of thinking is that kind of helps alleviate the traffic counts on Poplar. And what is the percentage of traffic going up 184th Terrace that was figured into the total traffic count?
So I'm not sure that we know the answer to the specific percentage.
They made an assumption.
I'm gonna
of
let him
something.
come
What
up.
would that be?
Well, the applicant doesn't make the assumption, the modeling makes the assumption. So what we need to understand is when a traffic model is run, it is looking at the geographic distances and turns and things and the segments on that road network, if you will. And it assumes that there will be a certain percentage of people that will be willing to save time going one way or willing to endure a longer period of time to make several turns. I'm going to let Tim, if you do want to come up a little bit, but primarily it is not a base assumption where we, as
Understood.
individuals say,
But
oh, it's 70% or 30%.
My question is then, is what does the model assume the percentage to be?
That I don't know if we know that right off.
No, I'm sorry, I'm Tim McEldown, he's city engineer. So, yeah, I don't have that data in front of me, but Dave's right. I mean, the initial thing that a traffic engineer does is come up with total trips and makes assumptions on how that spreads throughout the network. And that was reviewed by staff and by our on-call consultant and felt those were reasonable extrapolations of the traffic.
What, another question, if I could, what implications would there be if we cut off access to 184th Terrace?
You want to talk about it a little bit?
I think that already is a
So-
cul-de-sac.
So,
You're talking about 184th Street?
yeah, so there is a
184th
connection.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
There's a,
The tattoo street
So-
off of the new development, what if we cut that access?
yeah, so right now there is one access point at 184th Terrace, I believe, is the connection point.
184th
Terrace,
Terrace,
yeah.
Uh,
So there's a connection point there.
If we cut that off, what would that do to the model?
Well, there's ramifications beyond the model at that point. What the model would probably tell you is everything's gonna go up to Poplar to 183rd, because that'll be the only
That's
way
the
out.
way in and out.
Now, the other part of that is we have fire district concerns related to that. So we're trying to talk to the fire district about some of those options currently, because what they are concerned about is the distance that they have to go and the number of units that they would have to serve with only one entry point. So if they're in an emergency mode and all of a sudden the traffic is blocked on Poplar, it's blocked on 183rd, and there's no other way in and out of there, that's where this comes into play. So it goes beyond the model at that point, into some of the functional characteristics. And then how that may be set up is also a public works question, because it could influence how utilities are run, it could influence public access on public roadways, things like that. So that's why we're also kind of suggesting this motion,
Right,
is to
right.
grant us some
Get
time
these
to look at
questions
those
out,
things.
so we
These
can-
are just the questions I would like to have.
Yeah,
for
I
Yeah.
think maybe
consideration.
just keep reading the questions, and
Yeah.
now it's not, we don't
Yeah.
need to
Sure,
have
we
the
don't
back
need
and
the
forth
answers
because
necessarily now.
he's getting them off the
Yeah.
cuff. Yeah, go ahead and read it for the record.
The next question was, on the land to the south, the big chunk to the south of this development. That would also, if this was approved, that'd also be RP4?
Not at this point, it would stay R1. So it stays- it would stay its
To do anything
current
with that would
zoning.
require another plan.
Right.
Another plat, so it would stay R1 and would not be addressed by this.
It would not be addressed,
This is why it's gotta be R4, because that's so dense.
Right.
So that's
I'm
where-
concerned about this
Yeah.
down here.
I see, okay.
so that is why it's suggested that that development or coming forward with another development plan would not occur until phase 2, at a time when there were other connections to the south or east off of that
So
parcel.
this phase 1 stops at this?
Correct.
Okay, that was my question.
Mm-hmm.
Got
And
another
then, ongoing, kind of related to the 184th Terrace question. Could butternut be cut off? I understand to the south of land, we're gonna have to have an entrance either to 188th or back to Gardner
Yeah.
Road. Could that be a request on the part of the planning commission to say, we would like to see Fairfield cut off from this? And the new exits they're gonna have, or this new entrance they're gonna have down there to the south, there to alleviate any fire department or
Right.
any other kind of concerns that may be part of this.
So I will tell you that we will probably look into that, especially after reviewing and being part of the governing body's discussion. City Councilman Baldwin outlined an idea about connecting to Butternut. So we're gonna probably have to look at Butternut
That's over
from a
at
couple of
Marsh,
different
right?
legs.
Wouldn't that
Well,
possibly- I was
it's
wondering
it's
that.
an area that accepts some stormwater drainage.
Right.
How it's designated, if it's a wetland or a
Mhm.
stream area or whatever, has to be looked at also eventually, and that will impact potentially the development pattern in that area as well. So it all kind of converges up in that same location.
I also had a chance to visit with some of the residents of Fairfield. And I think that, I'm kind of driving these questions is if we could come up with a solution that completely takes Fairfield off the table as far as traffic of any kind on this thing, and route traffic either to the north or to the south, that would probably alleviate a lot of the concern of the residents of that neighborhood.
Okay.
Can we consider something like that?
It's all part of what we'll be looking at. And we may come forward with one recommendation out of that between the staff's review and things like that, so.
Yeah, because I think that if we can come up with something like that, that closes off Butternut and closes off 184th Terrace and leaves Fairfield as a subdivision out of the mix of the traffic, I think we're getting closer to something that.
Yeah, but then you still have the problem of the one way in and one way out.
But that's what
Yeah.
I said.
Yeah,
Consider part of that.
Right, as part of the discussion, yes, it's
As
a good
part of
question
that
to get out, is their
approval process,
research.
Going south or going east to Gardner
Yeah.
Road.
It'll have, right, look at some
Yeah.
different
That-
alternatives.
And leave Fairfield out, but I think that's gonna have probably a lot better chance of getting, kind of peace in the area.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions on your?
Nope, I'm done.
Okay, cool. Commissioner Juniman.
Thanks.
I think we've covered kind of a lot of that I had. I mean, kind of piggybacking off that, is there a master plan for this property and connecting to Gardner Road at this time? That shows kind of like a circulation or?
Not at this time. There were different thoughts that were going on. If you take, and I can't remember the apartment complex that's to the south off of 188th Street.
Nottingham Village.
I don't remember
There's also Nottingham Village.
Yeah, Nottingham Village, yeah. So when 188th was extended into that area, there was discussion about 188th as well as Poplar being collector streets in the overall transportation master plan at that point in time. Some of the intervening circumstances and costs in that have to do with a pretty wide floodplain because you have two drainages that feed and converge just to the north of Nottingham Village. And so there's bridge work and different things going on there. So I guess the short answer is transportation master plan talks about a connection of what I'll call collectors in that area. Poplar was on that transportation master plan, and I believe it was 188th. Looking at the larger area, there may be a way to connect at 186th Street to Gardner Road, because there's already a three-legged intersection there. There's a road 186th that comes out from the east side of Gardner and connects there. So there's a possibility to potentially run through there to connect in. But again, there's multiple parcels involved with this, not just the parcel owned by this applicant. So I would tell you, yes, in a broad term, there's the idea of having collector streets that would connect, which would also serve the purpose of potentially alleviating traffic from the 184th area, because now there would be a south route to go. But again, we're looking at all of that.
Good, all right, cool, good. McDear, did you have one other thing? you
Yes, I
wanted to
did.
add?
Is there, when we come back and take a look at this, that's what we go for a motion tonight. Is there any way we can have people from the fire department come here? present
Yeah,
so that
and
we
fire-
can get their
yeah.
concerns as well?
Yeah, and fire department will be part of the conversations that we're having as this is evolving too. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
we will probably have a fire department representative here at the same time.
Okay. All right,
Excellent, thank you.
good. All right, I'll do one more look to my right to see if the conversation spurred any other discussion or other questions any of the commissioners want to ask. Ham, Souza, you good? Nope? Okay, I don't have anything either, so
Do you-
I will entertain a motion.
Do you want me to reread what the suggested
Yeah.
motion
No,
is?
I wrote it down.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was
did
just-
you?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, and then I'm gonna let our city attorney representative make sure that's good with
Okay.
him. I'm gonna sit down.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Motion recommending the governing body allow additional time to further investigate potential traffic solutions by way of potential new plans and traffic studies relating to the proposed Fairfield rezoning and preliminary development plan at the Planning Commission's May 22nd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
Did Cleverson get that one this time? Okay, great. Awesome. Got a motion made by,
Who was the motion?
we have a motion made by Ham with a second by Souza. Hadn't got there yet, Dave.
Well,
No worries.
As you know, staff limited, so.
I know,
don't
you are
say
limping
fine.
along tonight. I'll give you that one. I'll give you that one.
So,
Ham, second by Souza.
So,
That's right, you're having to be note keeper.
yeah, I'm doing my best.
Okay, all right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on that motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries 6-0, no abstentions. We don't have any discussion items, but I'll just look up to see if there's anything staff might want to bring up this
I'll
evening.
just very quickly, so that people that are in the audience
Perfect.
understand again, that suggested motion for item number 3, the Fairfield development, it will be on the agenda for the city council, for the governing body. Differentiate, the city council meeting, the full governing body will vote on that, on their meeting next Monday, May 1st, at 7 p.m. in these chambers. So they'll consider it and take action there. If they go along with that recommended motion that you just passed, this will appear on your May 22nd Planning Commission agenda, which is the 4th Monday of May. So that's how this will all come together. And at that point in time, hopefully we'll have some thoughts, recommendations, guidance, different alternatives potentially, or maybe even just a recommendation about it to go. So I think the comments of the commission tonight were helpful in guiding us a little bit on
Good.
some of the concerns and thoughts there. So we'll take that into consideration. Trying to think if there was anything else that I wanted to mention to you. I will just suggest if any of you have an attendance issue with May 22nd, please let me know as soon as possible. I want to make sure we have a quorum for that meeting because of the expectations of both the public and the applicant. So if that happens, I just want to make sure if you do have scheduled conflicts, let me know as soon as possible. Only send your emails to me, right? Because we don't want to violate any of the open meetings by having everybody engaged in a conversation on that. So please just send that to me if you have any negative issues with, I don't want to say negative issues. Why did I say that? That was
You've had a long day.
I'm a teacher. There is no thing as stupid.
Yeah, thank
No,
you.
no stupid.
So anyway, if you cannot make it, just let me know.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I
End of
think
that.
we are ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn made by McNear with a second by Ham. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, meeting is adjourned 6-0.
Finished decompressing my day. I wasn't even thinking of coming up.
Hey, take care. Good luck with